Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Maria Rennie, and I am the Deputy Consulate-General here at the British Consulate in Chicago. And it's my pleasure to give you a very warm welcome to today's virtual Pride event. And today's event is a panel discussion on LGBTQ diversity and inclusion in the arts. And I'm really happy and proud to be representing the UK today as the moderator in this discussion. The UK is seen as one of the most progressive countries in Europe for LGBTQ rights, and we have one of the strongest legislative frameworks in the world to tackle and prevent discrimination. I obviously work as part of the British Diplomatic Service. That's why I'm here in Chicago and not back home in the UK as a civil servant. And the British Diplomatic Service works across 168 countries in the world. And one of the very important pieces of work that we do is defending and championing LGBTQ rights across the globe. And personally, I cherish this part of my job. I value the voice that it's given me to be able to speak out and to start earning my place as an ally. I think back on my career, and I think that some of my proudest moments have happened in consular rooms in various different countries across the world, where I've had the privilege of being able to provide a marriage service to same-sex couples where one or more of the couple has been a British national. And I think that's just been such a very visible and loud, but yet personal representation of the UK government's commitment to equal marriage. But what I also appreciate about the UK and the UK government is that we're not complacent about this. We do really appreciate that there is much more to be done, and that's both domestically and internationally. And Pride is a really important part of that work. So here we are on the 30th of June, 2020, and it's the end of Pride Month here in Chicago. And in any typical Pride Month, my consulate colleagues and I would have marched probably with about 1 million others of you through the city of Chicago as part of the city's fantastic Pride Parade. And last year, my consulate colleagues across the US and our embassy staff took part in or hosted 16 different events across the United States as part of our Pride campaign. And they were all obviously in-person events, but the COVID-19 pandemic has forced the cancellation of those in-person Pride events this year. But we were really clear that we weren't going to let that stop us celebrating the LGBTQ community. And that's why we're here today. We've looked for different ways in order to promote and protect the rights of our LGBTQ colleagues, families, and friends, and strangers across the world. So welcome all of you to today's event. It's one of a series of events that's taking place across the US as part of the British government's first ever virtual Pride campaign in the United States. So thank you all very much for being part of this campaign. It's entitled Love is Love. We appreciate you have a lot of demand on your time at the moment. There's lots of other Zoom rooms that you could have been in at this moment in time, but you've chosen to be with us. And I know that today's discussion is going to be both interesting and informative. We have such a fantastic panel with us today. So it's now my pleasure to introduce them one by one. I will announce everyone's name and title, and they will have the opportunity to kind of chip in a few words if they want to add any kind of relevant life or career info that might help the audience get to know them a little bit better. So in no particular order, first of all, let me introduce Ashley Wheter, MBE, the Artistic Director from the Joffrey Ballet. Good morning, good afternoon, Ashley.
Yeah, good afternoon, Maria, and to our wonderful audience that have joined us today. Really thrilled to be here. What a great panel to be included on, such a wonderful panel. So I look forward to the next hour and our conversation about diversity in the arts and where we are and where we need to go.
Thanks, Ashley. We're looking forward to hearing from you. And next on our panel, I have Dr. Rebecca Rugg, who is Dean of the College of Architecture, Design and the Arts at the University of Illinois in Chicago.
Hello. It's so nice to be here today. It's a great way to round out Pride Month. I'm super impressed that the embassy is hosting this, and just really glad to be a part of it. Can't wait to take part in the conversation. Thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca. We're really looking forward to hearing from you, and thank you so much for joining us. Next, we have Wheter J. Taylor. So Wheter is the Wheter Director of Education and Engagement at the Goodman Theatre in Chicago. Hi, Wheter. I think we have you on mute.
I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm looking forward to the conversation, and I'm thrilled to see everyone in our Hollywood Squares boxes.
Yeah, we're all getting used to being in virtual boxes these days. And last but certainly no means least, I'd like to introduce you to Delia Crock, who is the Artistic Associate and Board Member of the About Face Theatre. Good afternoon.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, I just wanted to mention that About Face Theater is going up on 25 years of providing a very unique theatrical experience, advancing the dialogue on gender and sexuality in the arts. So we're very proud this year.
Well, congratulations. I'm glad we can celebrate that with you today as well. Thank you so much. Thank you to all of you for joining us today. As our audience members will know, when they registered for the event today, they had the opportunity to ask questions to our panelists. So those questions are going to form part of actually most of today's session. So we'll work through as many of them as we can in the time allotted. I want to reassure you that behind the scenes, should my IT go down, that my very good colleague Nick Fiore, who's head of our political and comms team in the consulate, is ready to step in. So we shouldn't see any downtime for long. So keep your fingers crossed that the IT gods and goddesses and gurus are in our favor today. So I will start working through the questions. I have an individual question for each of our panelists to kick us off, and then some general questions for any of the panelists to chip in and give their responses. And I think we're going to do some hand raising if someone wants to speak and I haven't asked them the question already. So my first question is for Dr. Rugg. So Rebecca, would you mind starting us off with a bit of historical and social context? How well do you think that we're doing as a society, including diverse LGBTQ voices in the arts? What would you say have been the major victories, and where do you think we still need to improve?
That's a great question. Thank you. I feel like you called me doctor, and now I'm supposed to like really be able to recite some history for all of you. I mean, I'll try my best, but please, anyone else chime in. I guess I would just say, well, I guess off of your celebration, Delia, of About Face Theater, in Chicago, I would say About Face is a really notable and nationally a notable theater for having lasted so long as a theater that's dedicated to exploring gender and sexuality. I don't think I can probably do justice to this question in terms of like major milestones. But I would say I can, in terms of taking the temperature of the moment that we're in right now, the arts community is having a huge dialogue prompted this moment by the, sort of outpouring of support around Black Lives Matter. And I think it's an incredibly overdue dialogue. And I think that inside of the arts, and I mean, the arts are plural. And, right now I'm in leadership in a college that has many artistic disciplines. So, I come out of the performing arts and theater, but, now I'm really learning so much more about architecture and design and the visual arts. And I would say, certainly in the performing arts, I think there's always been a queer presence. And I think, though, that presence has largely been white. And by saying that, I don't mean to erase the incredible contributions of, queer artists of color. But I would say, if you look at this panel, I think it is reflective of the history and present moment of the creative disciplines, which is to say the leadership is largely white. By saying that, I don't mean to erase your presence, Willa. Willa is one of the leading thinkers and most active people in this area. in theater. So I'm very glad she's here. But I think, it's important. I think we're in a generational moment where things are, I hope, really about to change. And I guess one of the things I was thinking about in preparation for today was just that, I think that diversification, especially in terms of culture and race and historically underrepresented minorities in the performing arts, is happily becoming understood to be more complex than maybe it has been taken to be for a long time. And by that, I mean that I think for a long time, there has been an invitation to be on stage for people of color, maybe not in roles that were as complex as everyone would have liked them to be. And certainly there's a complex history around representation. But I think, one thing I'm really excited about is that need for diversity is now understood, and I think powerfully, to be important backstage, in design, in administration, and in production and fabrication. And I think, I'm incredibly committed to this and fired up about it. And it's part of why I'm at UIC, because I feel like the pipeline of people who are trained to take part in that part of our, creative discipline, those parts of our creative disciplines, I'm excited to be training folks who are going to take up that role. I think it's going to make all kinds of difference. So I'd be very excited to talk about pipeline issues today. It's not really answering the question you asked, so I'll stop talking now, but I'm really happy to be here. And I'm so happy for this focus on, what it means to talk about diversity and inclusion in the arts inside of LGBT. So, this is one of the issues I'm most passionate about, and I'm really interested to hear what everyone else has to say too. So thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca. I mean, I think whether or not you think you've answered the question, you gave some really great insight there. And I thank you for kind of flagging Black Lives Matter. I think it's really important that when we're having this conversation today, we're looking a little bit broader, and we cannot ignore the intersectionality that we need to address when it comes to diversity and inclusion as well. So thank you for raising that as part of your answer. I think that's an important part of the discussion today. And I look forward to hearing others speak on the topic as well. I have now a starting question for Ashley. So Ashley, from your experience as part of the LGBT community in the arts, what progress have you seen there, and what still gives you hope?
I think that, in my lifetime, both as a professional dancer, but also becoming an artistic director, I think that there is a greater understanding. I think that, we have educated ourselves, we have listened, we have learned about inequality, because there is a huge amount of inequality. And I think that, we have to keep expanding, what equity is. And I think that, this is a moment where it's not just about the queer world, but it is about Black Lives Matter. It is about racial equity and how that plays a part in the arts. And I think that, there is a tolerance in the arts for the queer community, and there always has been. But I think that there are lots of people that are left out of the conversation, and I think we need to include those people in a much deeper, broader capacity. And how we we talk about pipelines. Becca talked about pipelines. Like, how do we build those pipelines? Growing up from a very young age and understanding the world that we live in, and acceptance and tolerance that all go part and parcel with that. So I think to answer a complicated question, I think that we're doing well. But I think that if I look at the performing arts and I look at the ballet world, I think that we have not told so many good stories that are to do with racial equity. I think there are many stories to be told that should be put on the stage. And so I think in the ballet world, in the dance world, we still have a ways to move forward with that for sure. And I think that, for the world right now, it's asking us to really listen to people and really hear what they're saying, and how we use that information is going to be a turning and a pivotal moment in changing the paradigm as we move forward. You know, not only in the arts, but I think like just in our lives globally, how we respond to each other.
Thanks for that, Ashley. Yeah, I mean, I think that, again, just hugely insightful comments as well. And I mean, this is 5 of us talking in a virtual room here in Chicago, but this is such a huge and global issue, as you say. Something that happened in Minnesota at the end of March, at the end of May, has given almost the entire globe kind of a really strong wake-up call. And it's how we take that momentum and turn it into action that really counts. So
right, and I think to your point in the beginning, Maria, like when you were, you know, the UK has been such an advocate for equality and for people's rights, and I think that, you know, we have to realize that in the world it isn't always that way, you know. Yeah. So and there's a lot of theatre that is not allowed in parts of the world because of subject matter, because of the discipline of the art form. So, you know, it is an unbalanced world that we live in, and hopefully collectively we can, you know, make a difference and open up countries where there is so much stigma around human rights, you know, gay rights, racial right, you know. I think we have to look at it all.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And though back home in the UK and here in the US, we are facing our own challenges for diversity and inclusion, it isn't like some of the challenges that other countries are facing, where you know, your sexual orientation or your gender identity is criminalized. So yeah, definitely interested in any kind of global international perspectives that people have to share. Thank you, Ashley. Okay, so my next opening question is for Wheter. Bear with me 1 second. So as an educator and an advocate in our community, how do you approach working at the intersection of LGBT, socioeconomic and racial justice? I think it's continuing along the same lines of the questioning and the answers here. What I think this is one that our audience will be interested in as well. What are some of the tangible things that our community can do to be good allies, do you think?
Thank you for that question, because I just came into this conversation from our summer youth program, where we have 27 young people ages 14 to 18 building solo performance shows this summer. And in terms of the questions that you asked Rebecca specifically, and how Rebecca spoke to Pipeline, and Ashley talking about the work that we've done and the stories that we've told as a community, it's interesting to me now to see, because the arts have been a welcoming environment, to see the number of young people who automatically put on their Zoom name tag their pronouns, they, them, and to be always at the intersections and working around the intersections of their identities, unlike my generation, where it was always a competition. You know, in this space, I need to be Black. In this space, I need to be a woman. In this space, I can be a lesbian, but never necessarily a place where those meet. And so I'm thrilled that collectively we have made enough strides to allow people to be who they are at a very young age, and to understand not just the political responsibilities, but the social and artistic responsibilities of bringing their stories onto a stage. I think where we have not done a lot of work, and this is where I think that allyship would really count. those students are great and they will go out and they will change the world, but they will struggle to get to positions of leadership where they are the ones who determine what the stories are that will be told. And I think, I work at the Goodman. It's a very large, very old institution. I've been there 12 years. I've been working in theater most of my adult life, which is more years than 12. And last season, when we produced How to Catch Creation, it was the first time I had ever seen an African-American lesbian couple on stage. And that, considering my age, considering how much theater I see, that's remarkable to me. And so what is it? Every actor, all of my friends that work in the industry, there's a large queer presence in the industry, but who is making the decisions about the stories that get told on the stage, and who is making a decision about what bodies then inhabit those characters to tell a story? Delia was on a panel for us, it's got to be a year, maybe two now ago, about representation. And what is it, it's great now that people are waking up to see people like Kristen Bell decide that perhaps, a white actor voicing a Black character is not right. But we still put straight people or cis people into transgender roles. We still have not fully told or allowed people to tell their own stories, not on stage, certainly in film. And so one of the ways to be an ally is to demand that those stories get told. When you look at your season brochure and you don't see a story that is about you, what does it mean to write a letter to the artistic director and say, I don't see myself reflected in your work, and start that conversation? What does it mean to demand that that the sort of work of the non-traditional casting symposium, where the idea was that people of color can play any role, what does it mean to demand that from the theater that you give your money to, or the ballet that you give your money to, or the university theater department that you give your money to? And what does it mean to demand that those departments, especially in academic environments, those departments allow actors to study the full range of the dramatic canon and not just the Eurocentric white canon that we all study?
Thanks for that. That was a really interesting answer. I mean, there's a really good kind of question there about accountability, isn't there, for not kind of putting that representation on stage in the way it should be, and in film as well. That was great answer. Thank you, Willa. And certainly you referenced Delia in your answer. Delia, definitely not least, although you are last in my individual question round. So I have a question for you. So as an artist yourself, how have you approached using art as a communicative tool to raise issues and to start conversations specifically around LGBTQ rights? And second part of the question, so it's an extension of the first question, I suppose. Where have you seen art used to break through to people or to have a social impact?
Sorry, what was the second question again?
So it was, where have you seen art used either to break through to people or to have a social impact?
Okay. Well,
these
the
are
answer to
big
the second
questions.
one, yeah, well, yeah, they're pretty much related. I see it all the time. The Goodman particularly has been just wonderful in increasing representation of all sorts. And in a very white, very old, very cisgender audience in that world in particular, right? And as well as Steppenwolf and many younger, smaller theaters, that is one of their primary missions, not least of all AFTs. In terms of what I have done personally as an artist, well, I can relive the glory days of I Am My Own Wife, and that same year in 2016, also I began a dual approach, and I think a lot of artists are doing this. You create your art, you do your character, you memorize your lines, you do your plays, and hopefully it's a well-selected play and a good part. that does enhance people's awareness is such an overused word, but people's, that it gets deeper. And I think the lead character in I Am My Own Wife did that because it was a very complex transgender character. And not always on the right side of the law or ethics either, which, you know, takes us off the old pedestal of all trans people are just so noble and long suffering, and puts us squarely in the center of the human issue, which is that we all have a lot of light, a lot of dark. We make these decisions, we live with them. So there's that prong, there's the artistic prong. And then there is the prong of actual advocacy, where we speak as ourselves, the theater mask off, directly about certain issues. Back in 2016 at the Goodman, with the Goodman's help, I was able to organize a conversation, I think the first conversation that was exclusively about transgender representation and the kinds of stories that are being told about transgender people, transgender characters on the stages. So both the casting issue and also the types of stories issue. So this is not an uncommon dynamic for artists. We'll do the fictional, you know, we'll do the art, and then we also find a need to elevate things into everyday life and to start talking about issues directly. And for me, I'm beginning a new program called Brave Conversations. And it addresses the entire concept of human identity, kind of using gender identity, transgender identity as a hook, but just as the starting thing. Because for me, ever since I've gone on my gender journey, for me, the real issue about being trans isn't us and understanding us and, oh, is trans real? And, oh, is it genetic? Is it a social construct? It's you. It's the whole idea of humans, how we process people who are different from us, how we may feel threatened by that. Why do we feel threatened by people who are different from us? Evaluating people in terms of status and so on. So there's a lot of very direct content from just understanding our human identity that it's kind of hard to shoehorn into a fictional work sometimes. So that program is my effort on the more direct advocacy end. So.
Thanks for that. Please share the details of that when that's pulled together. I'm definitely there.
Good, I will.
That sounds really important and interesting as well. Thank you all for those individual answers. I'm going to throw some questions from our audience out, and for any of you to kind of chip in and take the answer, or to kind of jump off the back of each other as well. So some of these questions will touch on subjects that each of you have raised already, because I think we can see some strong themes running through the conversation already. So traditionally, the arts have been seen by many as a safe space for raising controversial issues and challenging beliefs. Do you still think that's true today? Anyone want to take that? Hey, Willa. Over to
Should
you.
I start or Willa? Are you trying to answer, Willa? You should answer.
No,
Oh,
you
now
go.
you're mute.
You go. I'll piggyback up.
Okay, I'll just say, I mean, you know, yes, the arts are the place to bring up controversial issues. You know, the arts are also a business, and this is what's tricky, because, you know, we have this whole dialogue with our audience, and sometimes, you know, as leaders in the arts, we have a dialogue with our imagined audience. And I was thinking about this while Willa was talking, because I've been in a lot of, you know, before I moved over into academic life, I worked in nonprofit theater. I worked at Steppenwolf. I worked at the Public Theater in New York. And I've been in a lot of rooms where, you know, there was a lot of conversation happening about what should we select for our season. You know, and I don't think it's giving too much away to say that, you know, sometimes the conversation goes to a place where it's like, oh, but does everyone really want to hear that story? Is it too specific? Maybe they won't be interested. Who's they? You know, in Chicago, that's like the North Shore, will they buy tickets to that? You know, so I think, you know, in terms of allyship, you know, I think one really good way to function as an ally is in all those rooms where it's imagined that a really specific story, let's just say of two Black lesbians on stage, where it's imagined that that's not going to be interesting to people who are not like them. I think, you know, the exercise of allyship is to say, yes, it will. You know, and I think that one place, you know, that this, I think, allyship can really take place is on boards of trustees. Boards of trustees are overwhelmingly filled with wealthy white people, you know, and I think that there's a real force there to be had where boards of trustees can be advocates for more complex stories being told on stage. You know, they can be the representatives of that imagined North Shore audience, you know, to say, like, I will buy a ticket for this, you know. I think this is important. So, you know, is there room for controversial story on stage? Yes. It is sometimes perceived to be, or maybe actually in conflict with what we imagine people will buy tickets for. So I'd be interested to hear what other people think about that. So.
Thanks, Rebecca.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting that you say that, Rebecca, the dichotomy of sort of how we think about the audience, because I think that sometimes that choice really is about what people will buy tickets for, not necessarily, you know, when we think about at the Goodman, we think about a 9-show season and Christmas Carol that we've been doing for 3,000 years. Even before the theater was open, I think we had a production up running someplace. And Christmas Carol is in many ways the cash cow. So the structure, the casting of Christmas Carol and the money that show brings in then allows us to do something a little riskier, like How to Catch Creation, where you have two lesbians on stage that people may not necessarily buy as many tickets for, or feel that play speaks to them in a certain way. My concern around that always is that when we have that conversation, we're thinking about the audience that we have right now, not the audience that will be coming to the theater in 5 years. And so How to Catch Creation, this beautiful play by Christina Anderson, which tells this story of a Black queer author, a man who finds her books and sort of realizes the connections between them. You know, the play, it's a beautifully written play. Audiences loved it, but the student audiences that I brought into the theater for it were overwhelmed by it. And it is the show, often, you know, I'll run into a student and a student will say, oh yeah, I know you from the theater. I saw that show one time. And that is sort of what they take away from it. But everybody remembers How to Catch Creation, and they go on at length about it. So there was something about that show that spoke to a new generation differently than how it spoke to the generation of people that were already buying tickets. How do we make shows like that? How do we think about the voices that are to come, not the voices that are on our boards, that are the subscribers right now, but the community of people we want to support the art in the long haul? How do we think about reaching out to them with the work that we put on our stages right now?
Yeah, that's a super interesting point. I think, Ashley, do you look like you were going to chip in there? Ashley, you're on mute, I think.
Sorry. I just want to follow.
We all do it.
Because I think that, you know, obviously, you know, like A Christmas Carol, we have the Nutcracker, and that is our revenue generator that allows us to do so many other things. And so I think that absolutely, to Willa's point, that who is the future of our generation, our audience, and what do they want to see? And I do think that, you know, there is always a part of our audience that will always want to stick with what they know and what they feel comfortable with. But I also think that we have started to make headway, and I say this particularly about the ballet world, because I think theater has always been unafraid, and they've always been able to challenge, whereas, you know, we have an art form that has a lot of preconceptions about it and what people's expectation is when they go to the theater. But we have started to change the narrative and change the story. And that is going to be the way that I think that the world of ballet is going to move forward into, this, everyone uses this word, but to be relative. Like, to be relative in our art form moving forward is key. It's going to be really key for us. So, it is about telling different stories that are going to appeal to a very different audience. But I also think that our traditional audience have come a long way in kind of accepting things in the theater, and particularly with ballet.
Yeah, that's super interesting as well, because you can bring your audience with you, you can influence your existing audiences, but Willa's point as well is so valid about that future audience. And actually, it just makes good business sense to be thinking about that future audience as well, regardless of all of the other benefits to it. Great, thank you so much for those answers. Let me jump on to another question from the audience. I think it's one we talked a little bit about already, so maybe we can get some answers on this quicker than some of the other questions which we might be touching on for the first time. So one of our audience has asked, how can we ensure that casting choices are done in a way so as to ensure representation, diversity, and inclusion?
I mean, I'll step in here. So there are different kinds of structures of companies, and I think that one of the things that I so admire about Robert Joffrey when he founded the Joffrey Ballet was that, we are a company of 45 dancers, and there is no ranking within those 45 people. We are one body. There is no principal, soloist, a quarter ballet. And I think that I have always believed that the person that is creating the work should have people that they really want to use and that they respond to. And I think that, everything that is happening right now in the world is making a lot of choreographers and creators and designers think about what that looks like. So I'm hopeful that there is a much more conscientious vision about the future of casting, and that it doesn't matter whether you're a black, brown, white person, like anybody can do Sleeping Beauty if they want to. We don't have to separate it because we have an idea about what it should look like. So I think we need to just open it up, and a great actor, a great dancer is a great dancer.
Great. Anyone else from the panel want to jump in? I'm happy to move us. Oh, Willa, you're up.
Sure. I love that you say that, Ashley, about sort of the equanimity in Joffrey, and that's a problem in theater. There's a hierarchy at most theater companies. The casting director can make recommendations, but it's, of course, the director and then the artistic director ultimately that sign off on who's going to be on that stage. And certainly thinking about the folks in casting at the Goodman, they push constantly around challenging a director to think more broadly, to see a wider pool of people. They've changed the way that we put out information about casting and the postings, so to make it as inclusive as possible. But ultimately, it's a director's choice. And how do we get the director and the artistic director to understand what it means to have the expansiveness of diversity on stage? Thinking about Nutcracker, we do Christmas Carol every year, and every year we get hate mail because something has changed. It is when we first started using young actors of color to play Tiny Tim, you would have thought really that we had brought Charles Dickens out on stage, dug him up from the grave, and reburied him. It was insane 2 years ago or 3 years ago now, we cast the director cast a woman as Fred and changed it to Frida. And people left the theater. They were incensed that gender roles were changed. You know, maybe we need to be comfortable with saying, well, I appreciate that you bought the ticket, but maybe now you maybe need to look at another theater to come to, and be willing to lose the audience or those audience members that can't come along on that journey with us, and find the audience members that will, because just as many people who don't want to see a woman play Fred, there are equally, if not more people who are happy to see that that gender role has been cast in a very different kind of way.
Mhm.
And so to convince directors to really take that kind of step and to get the artistic director to push as well, not just having the casting people pushing up for that, but also have the artistic director pushing down as well.
I think that's a really good point. And I think that if we are always going to be afraid of losing our audience, then we will not advance. And I think that like we have to. I mean, I think also like in more contemporary works, there is a lot more freedom because all those ideas about historical work or go away. And so, you know, we had a wonderful choreographer who came to the Joffrey and looked at everybody, and it was specifically a role that had been created for 2 men. But in the end, they decided that they wanted to create it for 2 women, 2 men, a man and a woman. And it was people that were Black, people that were brown, gays, you know, it was everything. And you could feel the response from the audience that they totally accepted what they were watching in the most profoundly beautiful way. And I think that we would have probably, to Willa's point, the same problem if we got to some ballets like Swan Lake, where people have an idea, well, that's just not the character. But I think that from my point of view, I think it's an open playing field. And I think that our audience have a choice to really embrace something new, or like they find somewhere else to go.
Thanks for that, Ashley. Delia, do you want to come in on that at all? Any kind of audience or comments that you've had or reactions that have been strong or shocking or extremely positive?
Well, from day one, we have been all about gender and sexual role inclusivity. So we've encountered a lot of shocking responses from people. But the idea of about face is to explore these changing concepts of gender and sexuality, and along the way, very much part of our mission has been to include diverse cast and to reach as diverse an audience as we can. That's in the works. We're evolving towards that. I believe most theaters are. Shocking, or in terms of introducing new thoughts and new thinking. It seems like almost every play we do does in some way, shape, or form, depending on who the audience member is. But that's our job. Our job is not just to do, no aspersions to other LGBT theater companies, but there are basically shows that kind of sum up and celebrate where we've been. Okay, they'll call those like mountaintop theaters. So look what we've accomplished. We've now got gay people doing this, lesbian people doing that, trans people doing that. And then there's theater that looks ahead and tries to push the limits a little bit. And that's where we have tried to keep our direction and our programming, and wherever we can, our casting as well. So that's all I have to add to these wonderful remarks. Ditto on all of the other things there. Yeah.
I just think that's such a great point. Thank you for that, Delia. I think, there's obviously something in there about all of your roles to kind of entertain, but there's an educational role in there as well. And sometimes that educational role might involve shocking some people to kind of bring about an awakening, and it doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. It might need to happen in some cases. So thank you for that. I am going to pick another question from the audience, is around stereotypes. So to what extent do you feel that we should change the stereotypes that people have about those that are interested in the arts? And how would we do that if we were going to change those stereotypes? These aren't small questions that the audience have asked you today.
Now, would you clarify that question for me? Are you talking about stereotypes among people that are in the arts?
Yeah. So the example that the questioner has given is so about a stereotype about people that are interested in the arts, and they might then go on to be part of the artistic community, or they might just be in the audience in an active way. And the example that they've given is a young man that was interested in ballet. Is how they've kind of specified that.
I mean, it's a huge topic because it comes from upbringing, from parenting, from stigma. You know, what is it to fit into a certain kind of lifestyle that works for people, even if it doesn't work for you as an individual? You know, we battle in our childhood against our parents' ideology for what we should be. So I think we need a world that is really open and accepting of that we can be who we want to be without being judged. But that is a really tall order.
Yeah, it goes beyond the arts as well. Rebecca, I saw that you wanted to jump in.
I don't know if I have a good answer about stereotypes, but I was thinking about something during the last question that I think may go to it, which is, I think, you know, I guess, you know, when I teach students, I had a very canonical education in theater, you know, and I was mad about that for a long time, but now I feel like so grateful to know the canon, and I feel like the canon belongs to me. And it's one of the things that I want to teach the next generation is like, absolutely, the next generation should write its own stories and tell its own stories, but also the canon belongs to all of them too, you know? And I think that, you know, we're in such a polarized and extreme feeling time in our world. And, you know, the Greek plays are so much the story of right now. And I feel like they belong to anyone who wants to tell them, do you know? And at UIC, like we had a whole class this semester that was dedicated to Antigone, you know, and the UIC students, who are a very, very diverse student body, really responded to Antigone. And it felt really profound to me to be able to say and have them know Antigone belongs to them, you know, that her story belongs to them, not in some like busty, dusted off kind of way, but in a visceral, right now, like extremely urgent kind of way. And so I guess that's a comment about the last conversation we were having, really about sort of like, who does Swan Lake belong to? You know, does it belong to the audience that wants to see it the same way every time? Or, you know, maybe there's a way to admit some change into Tiny Tim or whatever, you know, in the Christmas Carol. But I think it also goes to the question of stereotype, because stereotype ultimately is about oversimplification and imagining, you know, that we already know everything about that boy that's interested in ballet, you know, or we already know everything about, you know, I don't know, even Christina Anderson, who's a brilliant play you're talking about, Willette. You know, we don't already know everything about Christina Anderson. Her next play may look a lot like Shakespeare. Do you know? I mean, I think that we need to just admit plurality in a much broader way than maybe we've even conceived before. And that also needs to admit stereotypes. You know, I mean, I think there are some fun things about stereotypes if we live in a world that is generous enough to not use it as a battering ram. So that's what I would say. I think there's a way to just really think about, you know, our traditions, and I include ballet in this, although I know less about it. You know, it's a living tradition. We continually riff and reimagine our history in the theater. And, you know, it longs for that, and it requires that. And so I can't wait to see what the next, how far Christmas Carol can go, maybe, or, I mean, that feels very exciting, and it feels like what we're obligated to do by being contemporary artists. I can't wait till I'm in theater feeling pissed off about how far they've taken it. How awesome, I mean, that'll be, I look forward to that moment, so.
Thanks, Rebecca.
I think too, Maria, we need to think about expanding how we think about the arts. So, one of the things certainly here in Chicago, when the Chicago Public Schools talks about arts deserts, they always list South and West Side communities. Very rarely are there North Side communities on that list. Geographically, the North Side is whiter and wealthier than the South and West Sides of Chicago. But the reality is that they are not arts deserts that they've categorized. What they are is they don't have traditional, predominantly white arts institutions in them. It doesn't mean that they don't have art in them. Mm-hmm. There are hundreds of companies of ballet dancers in basements of churches and storytellers standing on the street corner and new actors performing at the gym and all of these places. But we have relegated the arts to this sort of highfalutin thing that only a rarefied group of people get to do, and have taken and removed the concept of art in sort of the everyday and the rituals of our lives, so that we don't see a continuum on that. If you understand that that young man who is doing praise dance in the church is a dancer, then the trajectory then to the Joffrey is not that large a step. If you understand praise dancing as an art, if you understand that the kid who is sitting in the corner doing spoken word with his headphones on, if you understand that that is art, then there is not a long leap for that person to then become a playwright, to then become an actor on stage. So to think about sort of taking the arts out of our rarefied sort of physical environment and reconnecting with the community and the roots. I mean, Shakespeare wrote for the people up in the gallery, the people who threw things. He wasn't necessarily just writing for the rich. If we think about art as a wider continuum, then there's less opportunity for that kind of stereotyping, because more of us then see ourselves as artists, see our ways into art in a way.
Yeah, that's a really great point. Thank you for that, Willa. I'm very conscious. I don't know where the time has gone. So we have just a couple more minutes left of the hour today. So what I might do is just try and do one lap round all of you with this particular question as the closing question for you all. So it's a question from the audience, and it's just how can the audience help with facilitating greater diversity, inclusion, equality, and opportunity for all in the arts? Is there anything that you could recommend, be it something to read or something to attend or something to have a conversation about even?
I mean, I would say that we need to be able to have a conversation, right? We need to always make space for everybody and their points of view about what we should be doing, what we're not doing, what we could do better. And I think that once you open that up to everybody, and that the channels are not closed to certain groups of people, then we can move somewhere, but we have to kind of break down the walls.
Thanks, Ashley. Who'd like to go next?
I would say demand that schools don't cut the arts budgets. Get on the local school council, even if you don't have children. talk to your friends who are on the PTA, and make them understand the essential nature of the arts in youth development, so that when the budget gets tight, as it will be when we come out of COVID, that it's not the ballet class, it's not the dance class, it's not the arts class that gets cut. It is something else. Maybe it is taking money, maybe we defund the football team and we take money from that and put it back into the arts. But the arts open a way for so many people to discover who they are and discover who they are in the world, that the younger that they get the ability to practice that and be a part of that, the better.
Thank you, Willa. Delia, would you like to go next? You're next on my screen.
Well, Ashley's raising his hand.
So I just want to add on, because I think that Willa's so right, and I think one thing that we're absolutely committed to at the Joffrey is that we have a huge community engagement program offering a lot of dance of all different disciplines all across Chicago. And I think that and Willa, you're right, like to this time where we know funding is going to get smaller and smaller. Like we have made a commitment to the Joffrey that, we will make these programs happen. And I think it is how you take your resources and put value on all the programs that you have and make sure that we find a way to support them, even if our government cannot. But it is the most enlightening thing to give a child the power of the arts.
That's a great comment. Thank you, Ashley. Lots of nodding heads there. I don't think anyone disagrees with that. Sorry, Delia, over to you.
No, I completely agree. But both of you have said there are different ways to support the arts in your school, whether it's a matter of urging a funding priority being reassigned, to volunteering as a parent that goes on a field trip to an art museum, or to go help the kids that want to get their own play started. Well, it's nice to have some parents around so that you've got more than just one teacher wrangling those 40-some kids that want to be in the school play. Am I right? Just showing up, asking what can I do to help the presence and the vitality of the arts in the schools is wonderful. And and if you happen to go, it would be nice if we've got a gender diverse or a racially unexpected casting going on here, that's even better. But show up. Yeah.
Great point, really great point. Rebecca, last but not least.
Hello. Yeah, I mean, I think that, Willa, you're just a prophet. Like that's, I just second what you said. I mean, I think also, my first thought when you asked the question was a little flip, like I would say buy a ticket to something you don't know anything about or that you think you might not like, So I would say continue your own self-exposure. That's a way to be an ally, open up your own realm of experience. And then the other thing I would say is, if there's a little theater company that you like or a little arts organization that you like, figure out how to, even in your own mind, formalize your support for that. If you have the ability and time to get on the board of a small organization, you may, for people who've never done that, that may just feel like outside the realm of possibility, but it's probably not outside the realm of possibility. But, I think, and then once you're there, use your voice for advocacy. So, I would really encourage that. It's super rewarding, or any other kind of volunteerism, as Delia was just saying, I think. But, I think to sort of formalize our relationships with the institutions that we care about as kind of audience members and allies right now, it's going to be really important. Nonprofit institutions are, all institutions, but nonprofits are really underwater, and they really need citizen advocacy. So, and that can look a lot of different ways, but I would say it's also just really important once you're there to raise your voice as an advocate for diversity in the middle of that.
Thank you for that. And that kind of overruns us over our hour. I could talk to you all day. You're so interesting and I'm learning so much. And I think this is a really important conversation. I know that we can't take up more of your time. So I want to thank you all. Delia, Rebecca, Willa, Ashley, thank you so much for joining us in the panel discussion today. It's been so interesting. We really appreciate the time that you've taken and the thought that you've given to answering the questions from the audience. So it's been a true honor to talk to you all this morning. Thank you so much for that. I'm very grateful. And
thank you.
Thank you.
One wish
you.
to Ashley, because I know Ashley was actually supposed to be traveling to Buckingham Palace this month to pick up his MBE from said Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth, member of the royal family. So fingers crossed that happens soon and that you can travel safely.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all so much for such a great conversation today. I'm sure you've inspired quite a few people in our audience. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks so much. See you.